Welcome to the Spirit-Centered Business Podcast, where we blend the spiritual with the practical for supernatural results. Now, here is your host, Bralynn Newby.
Hello there. Welcome to Spirit-Centered Business. I am so honored and blessed to be joined by Helena Cavan today, and I will introduce her more in a minute, but let's take care of some housekeeping. First of all, I want to let you know that the Academy is now open. You can go to spiritcenteredbusiness.com and click on the Academy button if you would like more training from our experts and also twice a month group coaching from me. And the cruise is now up and ready to go, also on spiritcenteredbusiness.com. Click on the cruise button. I am so excited about that. And then also, just to let you know that we are live. We air our shows live, as in I'm in the chat talking to people live on Wednesday nights at 5 Pacific, both on Facebook and on YouTube. And so wherever you're listening right now, go ahead and take a look at the show notes, because all of the information will be in the show notes as far as where you can find us and when. And 1 week after we air live, the video live, we are also airing the podcast on multiple locations. We are syndicated on iHeartRadio and iTunes and Spotify and Castbox and Deezer and Google Podcasts. I don't even know how many. There's a ton of them. So we are so blessed to be able to be syndicated through the Fringe Radio Network there. And you can also find the shows and all of the show notes right there on spiritcenteredbusiness.com. Okay, that's enough for announcements. Let's get to Helena. Welcome. How are you? You're in a different time zone. You're in a different country. Tell us all about you.
Oh, yeah, it's great to be with you, Bralynn. I'm in England and it's 5 o'clock on a Saturday right now. And it's been a lovely day to be indoors because it's really storming out there and we've had a really rainy winter. So I'm very happy to be inside.
I see that your water level is quite high. Yes.
Our water levels are high.
Oh, wow. So many people know you through Liebusters, but you actually have quite a different story for entrepreneurship and also, starting your own detox center. And there's a lot of story that people don't know. So I would love to have you share that.
Oh, sure. Well, I think that you just one of my mottos is the only constant in life is change. And I think that when you start out in life, if you can just understand that the norm is shift and change, rather than necessarily if I just get things perfect, then things will work perfectly. And so
why is that so frustrating?
I don't know. I think we just have this ideal of how it should look, and when it looks that way, then we will be our ideal. And it's actually about understanding that done is the new perfect, and it's about jumping in with both feet and going for it, really, and taking the risks. And I think being an entrepreneur, well, entrepreneurs take more risks than most people. So I think that's like number one. If you're not a risk taker, then you are probably not cut out to be an entrepreneur. And so anyway, my story really starts when I did, in high school, really, because I learned that I could work helping a friend redevelop real estate and earn money that way. So I learned that actually education wasn't about learning, earning money. It was about learning and about developing the passion of knowledge and growth. And so my parents didn't have requirements of me other than that I went to university. And so I indulged myself in doing a degree in music composition. And I think that what my compositional training taught me was how to start and finish something, because every piece of music begins and ends and is an experience in time. And I found that I had a natural aptitude for it and for a high level of detail. So if you think about a musical score, you've got, say 5 or 6 lines going by on a horizontal level, but you have to be thinking about what's happening on a vertical level at every moment as well, because you're choosing the harmony, which is happening vertically. You're choosing the expression, is it loud? Is it soft? Is it moving? There are all these, there are so many decisions to be made when you're writing a piece of music. And so I just learned to be decisive. And so when I finished my degree at the Royal Academy of Music in London, Jonathan and I decided that would be the time that we would start a family. So I actually didn't go on and do my master's degree that I had planned on doing. So I worked as a piano teacher and writing music to commission for 20 years. And then one day Jonathan came home and announced that he had been diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa, which is a condition, very rare condition, that causes you to lose your peripheral vision. And Jonathan's vision is probably like this now. And what that means is that it blocked out that much of his eyesight, so he could no longer drive. And it was very sad. 2014 was a very sad year for us, because it was the end of a season. It was the end of him driving. It was the end of me really being the auxiliary to him, because he had a software company and I always was the company secretary, and I helped him do the books and the accounts. And that's another thing about being a composer, is I have a very high aptitude in filling out forms and working with a pen. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And so, it's an applicable skill. So when it came time for bookkeeping and that sort of thing, it wasn't a problem for me. So I'd always just helped him in the business, and then I was mom, and then I was doing music and that. And so, so when he was diagnosed, it was just like this big kind of convergence, and life handed us a big bowl of lemons. And so I had this feeling of being the mother of Moses and taking this baby and putting it on the Nile and just letting go. And that baby was our house. And I just really felt the Lord speak to me that year and say, let me pay for it. You've always paid for it. Now let me pay for it. And it's an interesting picture because Moses's mother released her baby, and then her baby was raised by the princess of the court. And so the princess is the one that invested in raising that baby, even though it wasn't hers. And so the first thing that we did was we realized that was our biggest asset. So we tried to sell it. We tried to rent it out. We had a couple come and who wanted to rent it. And then 5 days before we were going to sign on the contract, they called us up and said, no, we're really sorry. We're not going to take the house. And it was, as soon as we had that really crushing news, it felt very crushing at the time, but as soon as that news came through, it was like, this is the Lord. Like, God's in this. There's a reason for this. And so the next morning, I had a text and an email from 2 completely different people saying, we think your property would be best as a vacation rental. So why don't you put it up on Airbnb or whatever? So we were moving fast. So Jonathan kind of wrapped up his old company in July. Our income kind of stopped in July. And by September, we had moved out of the house to a small rental in another town because we thought this other couple was going to take on the house. So we were moving fast. So that's number one point. If something goes wrong, it's really important to be proactive, decisive, and take action, and take action fast. Because if you're not earning money and you're living on saved money, you have only got a small window of time before that money runs out. So the main thing is you've got to focus on income, on revenue generation.
Yes.
So, and like so much, it was really painful. I mean, anything that our identity had been attached to that wasn't God got completely blown apart and blown away that season, because any identity that we had with our material things was just ridiculous, because we got rid of as much of our material things as we possibly could. And that was the first step, really, was material detox. And so we had some money to invest to, get the house painted, fix it up a little bit, buy a couple of beds and 3 sets of linens. And, Jonathan put it up on Airbnb, and within the first 5 days of it going up, it had booked out for Christmas and Thanksgiving. So that was really encouraging, because we're like, right, we're not going to lose the house, because that's always the first kind of thing. It's like, oh my goodness, how are we going to pay the mortgage and all the rest of it? Mm-hmm. So just shortly after we moved out of the house, I was meeting up with a friend to go for a run. And I don't really know to this day how I managed it, but I turned right and I ran into an agricultural truck in my car. So, and fortunately it was coming along very slowly. And so, I didn't really damage the truck, but it just totally just mashed in the whole front bumper of my car. And I had a really strong car. And so I was tired, I was stressed, I was sad. And so when I got home and I saw Jonathan, I said, I don't know, but I think I need to do a juice detox. And I don't know where that came from to this day, because I had never done a juice detox retreat before. But somewhere inside of me, I knew that doing a juice retreat would be the nourishing thing and the kickstart that my system needed in order to regain strength and recover from what I had been through. Mm-hmm. And he just looked at me and he's like, Helena, he said, we can do that. So who knows where that came inside of him. But since we had set the house up as a B&B anyway, we'd already gone through the process of, buying linens and getting it all, buying all the plates and all the rest of it. It just kind of seemed like a sideways step to start running retreats. And if I knew then what I know now, would I have done it? I am not so sure. But, this is the naivety of entrepreneurs, is that you just think the best and start.
Well, it's so interesting that you would have the idea to do something for your physical body when you were so mentally and emotionally drained. Mm-hmm. And it was at a point of just that breaking of emotional, and you said, I need to do something for my body. Isn't that funny that we need to connect and we need to not be separated? You know what I mean? I love that you put that together, that would help. Yeah. I think, there are many things in life that we cannot control, and sometimes our emotions and stress feel harder to control than what we put in our mouth. So it's sometimes easier to start with the physical, because the physical will always have an impact on the emotional, the spiritual, the mental. Mm-hmm. And so somewhere in my knower, because of my background, I knew that. And I think this is, at that time, what we had to do, what I was doing is looking very deep inside myself and saying, what do I already have and who am I already? Because I didn't have the luxury to go and retrain. I couldn't go and do another 2-year degree. We had to reinvent and bring in an income like immediately
So it's like, how do we make the most of what we already have and what we already are? And there was a really big shift in software going on at that point, because Jonathan had built the Liebusters website with a whole team of computer programmers, designers. At that time, we hosted all of our own servers. And it was right in that 2014-15 moment that everything changed in terms of the model of websites. And so this was when, WordPress was coming out and Squarespace were really starting to come out. And all of a sudden, Jonathan was able to do things all by himself that he would have paid a team of 10 people to do. And or he would have charged one of his customers 50,000, 60,000 pounds to do. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden he could do that on his own. So Jonathan was at home working on rebuilding a new Liebusters website, and also building the Milestone Detox website all by himself for the very first time. So we both had to be really brave in taking on new skills. And so what I did is I joined an online training to become a juice therapist. And, we just went for it. And I think the thing is now is that when I dug deep and Jonathan said to me, Helena, we can do that. We had a juicer all our married life, and my parents had a juicer, and my mom is really, really healthy. And I would say that my mom is a genius with healthy food, and she is a gardener. So I always refer to her as having green toes and green fingers, because she could grow. I watched her all of my life grow something on anything. So, my parents didn't step into owning their own property until much later in life. And so they were in rental properties as we were growing up. And there were times where there was no land and there was no dirt. And I would watch my mother literally build a garden on hardcore. Like she just had that instinct in her, like, I have to provide for my family. I have to grow food for my family. And she knew how to do it. So I think that when the Lord called us to starting up the detox retreat, there was this sense of, you already have what you need inside of you to do this. And I think it works that way. It's very rare that he would call somebody to do something that was completely disconnected to everything they'd ever done before and who they actually are. You know what I'm saying?
I absolutely know what you're saying, because that happened to me too. One would think that the industry that I'm in now, in coaching, business coaching, and being in the, some people would say motivational speaker. It's not really true, but that's kind of what the outside world knows. But anyway, one would think that that is so different than where I came from, being an architect. But I'm using project management and budgeting and putting a team together and keeping things on track. I'm pulling from experience to know what the solution to the problem is. I'm putting puzzle pieces together. So it's just a different industry, but the same skills. So I totally get what you're saying. It's important for people to do that assessment of themselves, though. I love that you were aware of that, because a lot of times we really discount what we're good at, and we discount our experience when we're trying to step into something new. And it's really important to take that inventory and say, what do I already have? And I love what you said. Who am I already? Love that.
Yeah. Well, when Jonathan said, Helena, we can do that, the first thing we decided to do was just go and do some research and development. So I went on a juice detox retreat, and he went on one to a different company. And when I was there, it was like, oh my word, I could do this so much better. And it wasn't in an arrogant way. It was just more from a serving heart perspective. Like I didn't feel that the retreat that I was on was about serving me and looking after me and inspiring and helping, coaching me. It was just, it felt like the minimum, but I'd paid a lot of money for it. So I felt a bit kind of it felt undervalued to me. And so I'm the opposite sort of person. I'm high value, overgive, over deliver. So it gave us a good sort of platform to think, okay, if we were going to do this, how would we want to do this, and what would we want our guests to experience, and how would we want them to feel? And I think that when you're naturally wired to think about others first, it makes business a lot easier, because all you really have to do in business to do well is to serve excellently. As long as you serve people with excellence and excellently, and you bring in that bit of magic where you give them things they don't expect and maybe even don't deserve, then there is absolutely no reason why they're not going to go and tell their friends about you, and why you're not going to have a continuous flow of business. So I said that then the next thing really is that my parents are Seventh-day Adventists, and I grew up a Seventh-day Adventist, and Adventists are in a book called The Blue Zones. And The Blue Zones is a book written by a National Geographic documentary maker named Dan Buettner. And it documents the 5 people groups around the world that live to over 100 years old. And the Seventh-day Adventists in Loma Linda, California are one of those 5 groups. So I grew up in a culture of health. And so when a lot of teens were out kind of hanging out at the mall and the theaters or whatever, I was sitting in health lectures given by our church as an outreach to the community by very highly trained medical doctors who were also very skilled with natural healing. So when it came time for me to start the detox, and I just showed up and started being with people as myself, I never realized how much I knew. Like I never realized how much was already there and in me, just because of my mother, what we ate at home, what I grew up with, what was my home culture. And that's God. Like he knows what's coming next, and he's a good father. So he will always prepare us for the next season. And sometimes the season that we are in bears fruit, and then it needs to be pruned in order to bear fruit again. And sometimes that pruning can be very painful, but he's always preparing us for the next season.
Yeah.
And so it was a huge learning curve for us, and it was hugely chaotic and crazy. But I made it a point at the very beginning of starting the company of reading books about other startups and other companies, so that I had a good sense of what the pattern is, what the trajectory is of the history of starting a business. So like, what are the different stages that you go through? What's normal in that new business sort of process? And of course, it's easy to correlate it to, having a child and having a newborn, and then having a baby, and then a toddler, and then a school-age child, and so on and so forth. But it just really gave me a lot of strength as I was going through each phase to know where I was at, so that I knew that it wasn't going to be like this forever. Because I think that when people start something, if they've never done it before and they're in this difficult moment, it's like, oh my word, I cannot do this forever. And it feels like it's going to last forever, because you don't see how the shift is going to change, is going to come about. And so I was able to recognize where I was at in the trajectory and say, okay, this is the chaos bit, this is the building bit, this is the forming bit, this is the storming bit.
Yeah.
And
so could you give us an example of recommendations for some books for people who would like to read those?
Well, one of the best books that I read was called E-Myth by Bradshaw, I think it is. Yeah. So I got a hold of that book and I thought, right, this is what I have to do. So I found an E-Myth coach. So I was very blessed to spend the first 6 months of the business with the E-Myth coach. And that was really hard because I was having to behave operationally as well as to develop it. So I was composing it whilst at the same time I was being challenged to do things I'd never done before and think in a way I had never thought before. But I'm very, very grateful for having the E-Myth coach because it gave me the right mindset from the very, very beginning of starting a business. And that is a successful business isn't about you doing everything. In fact, it's more about being a composer than it is about being a performer. In the sense that, it was my job to prepare the score. Yeah, it was my job to prepare the score and then to hand the score over to the conductor, and then the conductor leads the orchestra and they play the piece. And so what I was doing is I was writing everything down and creating materials so that I could have an operations manual. So that's what E-Myth really teaches you to do, is to end up with an operations manual. So you've got a notebook like this, and it's like, you want to know what the Milestone Detox is? I can put it on the table, and this is what it is. And where everything is systematized and written down and reproducible so that for everything we did, somebody else could do it besides me.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, I love that. That's exactly how I operate. And I do that in my business because I learned it in my corporate.
Right.
I managed up to 34 construction projects at one time. Do you think I had to be organized? Of course. I needed to know where everything was, and I created systems and structure because the companies that I worked for didn't have that. And so I love that. That's a beautiful way to think about it. And often people fly by the seat of their pants, and they're burning themselves out by repeatedly doing or repeatedly creating the system over and over again, rather than just writing it down. And I don't have to necessarily memorize it, because if it's written down, and I'm a spreadsheet person, so if it's written down there, I can either hand it off to someone, or I can just go check, 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 check. Okay, next. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that. Any other books that you would recommend?
Yeah, let me see if I have them here. No, that bookshelf is next door. Another really good one was the story on how the Coffee Republic started. And this is a British startup company. And Sahar Hashemi, so Hashemi is the author's name, and her first name is Sahar. And I saw her speaking at an entrepreneurs event. And so I went away and I bought her book, and it's called Anyone Can Do It. Okay. And it was basically how she was a lawyer, and she had trained to become a lawyer because that's, what you do. And then she found herself sitting in a law firm, having achieved what she had spent all her life to train to do, feeling really miserable.
Yeah.
And so she went on a trip to New York City, and she encountered the American coffee shop. And she absolutely loved it. And she's like, well, why don't we do this in London? Why don't we have this in England? And everyone's like, because English people don't drink coffee, they drink tea. So she and her brother founded Coffee Republic. And I think, if I remember correctly, when they were looking to borrow money from the bank to start their company, they were pushed away by 59 banks. I think it was the 60th bank that she tried that finally lent them the money to start up and get going. And really it was going through her story, and hers is a phenomenal story because they grew so quickly, and it was the E-Myth principle, you know, being rolled out, in that they by creating a template that they were able to reproduce and scale, they were able to scale very, very quickly, up until the point where she sold the business, I think 6 years later, for 30 million.
Wow.
And it was interesting when I met her, because she was expressing her sorrow and her regret at selling, and the pain that it went from taking it as a small business and then turning it into a corporate, and the whole phase of that. And that was very, very interesting for me, because it's like, would I like to be corporate? Would I like to become corporate? Yeah. You know, is that my vision? Is that where I want to go? Is that the journey that I want to make? And for me, it was like, not really. No, I'm not that sort of person. So no, that's not what I want, the direction that I want to go. So, so that was really helpful. Jonathan and I went to the Unleash the Power Within conference by Tony Robbins.
Oh, sure. And I think we all did, right?
Yeah. And that was really, really interesting spiritually to go through. But it was also interesting that out of the 3-day conference, the entire 3rd day was just about health and detox. So, you know, he's one of the most highly paid, highly successful human coaches in the world. And he is spending 1 out of the 3 days just talking about the body and health. So that was really reassuring, because everything that he talked about in his protocol was included in my protocol. So that was really affirming to me at the time, and just very, very, very encouraging. So I'll just never forget how I started the first detox March 2015. And I had a lady who had seen the website call us up, and she was just like, yeah, I can't come the week that you're starting. I can only come the week before. Will you do a one-on-one for me? And I'm like, yeah, okay, I can do a one-on-one for you. And she was a Christian lady, and she was a seasoned detoxer, because she had reversed colon cancer and had a very specific regime that she did every year to keep herself cancer-free. So she was a very seasoned detoxer, and she knew a lot more than I did in terms of her perspective, her overall perspective. So God sent her to me, and in that week, she taught me so much. You know, she gave me so much. And yeah, Helena, you should do this, you should do this, you should try this, you know. And so God sent me really kind and generous people at the beginning of my business to teach me. And at every single, checkout, I would always say to people, you know, what have we done right? How can we do better? I would write down everything they said. And all of their feedback became my list of things to do. So every detox was better than the last. Every detox we were implementing, from all of the feedback from the staff, from the clients, from the practitioners, anybody. I was just gathering, you know, how can I do better? How can I do better? And what I realized in that time was that by completely stepping out of my industry of music and entertainment into health, I had no ego at all, because I wasn't known. I wouldn't be known. I had nothing to prove, nothing to show. I was literally just there to serve people. And I just love how God did that with me, because I did have an ego. I think my identity was wrapped up in my in what I did. And so God really was just like, no, I want your identity to be wrapped up in being a heart of love and transmitting love and serving people in love.
That's so good. So you I just I love that you went through a program, so you invested in yourself immediately. You hired a coach, another investment in yourself. You know, you went through the Tony Robbins thing, you know, and you took the CANI, the continuous improvement, all out of it, and you're doing the feedback and continuously upgrading based on real life examples. Okay, folks, this is a learning moment, because do this in your business. This is brilliant.
Yeah. Implementation is everything, you know, and I'm not one to, you know, constantly be buying courses, but I'm not constantly doing online courses and things because I'm a completer finisher. So
Exactly.
I will not get into something that I don't feel that I can start and finish, you know, properly. And what was interesting is people would be like, oh, you know, you're still composing music. And I'm like, yeah, I'm doing a concert a year. But actually all of my composer needs were going into the creativity of the business. So that's what really taught me a lot about how if we apply our human aptitudes, we will be satisfied, and we can find different ways of applying the same aptitude. So what I would say to you and people is that in the United States, there's a wonderful organization called the Johnson O'Connor Research Foundation, JOCR. I don't know if you've heard of them. They only have 5 or 6 offices throughout the entire continental USA. They have one in San Francisco, one in Texas, in New York, Washington, D.C., and Seattle, I think are the 5. But they might have more now, I don't know. But anyway, so I'm from kind of Seattle area. So in 1996, I had a bit of a wobbly when I was doing my composition degree at the Royal Academy of Music, thinking, oh my word, is this the right thing? Is this what I should be doing? So a friend of mine had lent me a book called Your Natural Gifts by Margaret Broadley. And in this book, Your Natural Gifts by Margaret Broadley, she talked about the different human aptitudes and the different applications of the human aptitudes. So, for example, an airline pilot would do well to have the aptitude of pitch differentiation, because he will get used to the way a healthy engine sounds. And if there is any slight variation in the engine, he'll pick it up and know that something is amiss. And that's the same aptitude that a musician uses.
Beautiful.
So I read this book and I thought, right, I need to do that testing. So it was between my 3rd and 4th year of my undergraduate degree at the Royal Academy of Music. So I went back to Seattle one summer and I was tested. And so they said to me at that time, they said, you know, you are really unusual in the sense that your musical aptitudes are equally as high as your business aptitudes. So you can go either one of 2 ways. You can go into music or you can go into business. But we recommend that if you go into business, that you do music business. And so I finished my degree and I went into music. But the thing about human aptitudes is that they never change. So they can test the human aptitudes from the age of 14. And aptitudes are not talents. They are the absolutely fundamental structural elements that God puts into us when He creates us, that nothing and no one can ever change or take away from us. It's what we are born with. And I think it's really important that we all know what our human aptitudes are. And the reason I feel like it's important, because I believe that so much of purpose comes out of design.
Absolutely.
You know, if you think of a toaster, what is the purpose of the toaster? The purpose of the toaster is to make toast. Right. So if I know that I'm a toaster, I don't have to question my meaning and purpose of life. I know I am to make toaster, which is very different to making smoothies. So why on earth would a toaster be looking at blender and think, oh, I wish I was a blender. I wish I was making smoothies. When it's like, no, I'm a toaster, right? And I think that so many people aren't really clear about who and what exactly they are. And I think that with social media today, we are exposed to so many brilliant people and talent and, stuff people are making and all this, that it can make us feel so inferior and so doubtful of our own brilliance. And so it's like, I found it really, really helpful to learn that I was very, very high in all the music aptitudes. So yes, I was doing the correct degree. But fast forward that, 10, 15 years later, when I hit a crisis and all of a sudden I find myself going into business and it's like, oh my word, can I do this? About 2 years ago, I went to visit my brother who lives near Washington, D.C., and Katie was 14, my daughter at the time, so I took her into the center, and I'd arranged it to have the Seattle center send my results to Washington, D.C., so I could just have a catch-up with them, tell them what was going on, and they could review my aptitudes and say, look, this is how you apply your aptitudes in doing what you're doing right now. And basically what they said was that I had all the aptitudes to be a very good CEO. And so that I was absolutely doing the right thing. And it was just so encouraging, Bralynn, so encouraging to know that I had everything inside of me that I needed in order to do what I felt that God was calling me to do.
Yes. Yes.
So I would, I would recommend that people have their children tested from the age of 14 so that your kids can have that knowledge about themselves that says, I am not a blender, I am a toaster,
So I guess my question would be, what would be a good place to get that tested? Because some of those kind of testing places have an agenda to mold people into what they think society needs. And so I want to definitely not, go to those kind of places. So which one would be a good place to get tested?
Well, the only one I can recommend is the one I've experienced, which is Johnson O'Connor Research Foundation. And the thing that's important to know about them was that they were started out of Detroit in the 1950s because of the car industry. And the car industry, was the assembly line process. And I believe all genes with that, and I wonder what would happen. And so it was like, what would happen if we could actually measure who has finger dexterity so that people with a high aptitude in finger dexterity could be put on the assembly line to do all of this fiddly work? Because first of all, if they have a high aptitude in it, they'll be happy doing that kind of work. And secondly, our productivity will be maximized if we only have people with a high finger dexterity doing that kind of fiddly work. And so basically, Johnson O'Connor was founded from a research perspective. So they are not a company or business per se. They position themselves as a human aptitude research company. So they are always looking to identify more human aptitudes and to learn how those aptitudes can be tested.
Okay.
So what was really cool about going into the Washington, D.C., the D.C. office, is the woman I was speaking to was saying that she's now third generation. She's working with the grandchildren of the people that she tested, at the start of her career, and how interesting it was to see things being handed on generationally, but also how the aptitudes can be applied in so many different ways. So they don't position themselves as a career advice company. They position themselves as an aptitude research company. And I would say that what they have learned is that human vocabulary is very correlated to intelligence. So one of the things that they also test for, in addition to the aptitudes, is for vocabulary. And so if anything, they people to increase and work on their vocabulary as a way of moving forward and becoming more successful in the world. So, that was, so I can't recommend them highly enough because of how they have, how it's helped me, and also how I've seen it help my children in understanding, who they are. So my daughter right now, she's going through her GCSEs and her A levels next year in England, which are kind of exam periods of qualification. And they're very intense and they're very difficult exams to prepare for and to take. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, if you know that you're a humanities person, then you're just going to completely discount the sciences because you just know that that's not your forte. That's not where you're at. You're on this side. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And there are certain sciences that can converge between the two. So like geography, that kind of is a bit of a mixture between the sciences and humanities. But for the most part, she knows that she's humanities. And so then she, you just kind of stop beating yourself up when you're with your friend who's really good at maths and science to say, oh, I'm so stupid because I can't do maths and science. It's like, well, I'm different. And I think that's really what's going on in our world today, is there's just so much compare, contrast, superiority, inferiority, flip-flopping of values, rather than just dumping that whole system and saying, I'm different to you. Here's you, here's me, we're different, end of story. No judgments need to be made. No comparing, contrasting needs to be made. We're different, end of. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes. That's one of the things that I work with my clients, because oftentimes they have a message, or God put a message on their heart that they want to get out, and they say, oh, but so-and-so, who is a big name, says that. And I'm like, it doesn't matter, because your story is your story, and your experience, when you come out and articulate it in a way that people get it, the people that God has for you to touch in your business will resonate with it. And it doesn't matter if the words are the same, because you are you, and your voice print and your signature print and your energy comes through differently than that person. Yeah. So absolutely, I totally agree with you. I'm so glad you put it, you said it in a different way. That's absolutely brilliant, and I love it. So hopefully I took great notes, and I know I did. I'm pretty good note taker, so it's one of my aptitudes. Yeah, good. So another thing that I want to touch on before we go into the training for the academy piece is that your blending of your spirituality into your business and putting it all together. And I love that you called it allness when we were talking earlier. So why don't we talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I think it was last year I was with the Father, and he said, Helena, I want you to take the allness of me into the allness of yourself. And I was like, okay, the allness of you, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, into the allness of me. And I really felt him say to me, I want you to show up as your full self. Of everything that you are all the time. And years and years ago, I had been talking to a musician friend of mine about the concert poetry work that I do, and how, for me, music and words were very connected, and I wanted to do this work where I was writing words and I was writing poetry, but not songs, but music and words. And he said to me, you can't show up in the marketplace as two things. You can only show up in the marketplace as one thing. And so I kind of came under that, and I'm like, oh, okay. But what I really felt God say to me last year was, actually, I want you to show up as everything that you are. Mm-hmm. So you're a poet, you're a composer, you're a mother, you're a wife, you're a business person, you have a ministry. And I want you to show up all the time in all of that. So I was like, that I found that just really to think of the allness of myself containing the allness of him and showing up in full entirety, rather than I'm wearing my detox hat, or I'm wearing my composer's hat, or I'm wearing my poet's hat, or I'm wearing my Liebusters hat. And so it's been really liberating because of the work that I've been able to do of cross-fertilization. So I heard once that innovation happens when you take something from one industry and you bring it into an industry that it doesn't belong in. So for example, my sister told me about her dentist in Washington who started putting on teddy bear picnics for all of the kids in his dental practice once a year. And they could bring their friends. So all of a sudden you have a dentist who is bringing hospitality into his business. Why is he doing that? Because if kids get a wonderful teddy bear picnic party once a year at the dentist that they can bring their friends to, their friends will want to join that dental practice. And the dentist knows that if the kids join the dentist practice, the parents join the dental practice, and you have that family for life. So it was like, okay, how can I bring my creativity into the detox business? How can I bring the beauty of the creativity into the detox business? So for me, the detox business is this composition where I want it to feel really beautiful. I want it to look beautiful. I want the branding to be beautiful. I want everything to be really beautiful, because that is my signature in music and poetry or whatever, but also carrying that, real weight of truth. So I wanted to share something with you that I've prepared for your audience today. And in that, in 2012, I was commissioned by, when I was working as a poet and a composer professionally, I was commissioned by a National Trust property to write a series of poems inspired by the gardens. And so the Lord told me that he wanted me to redeem the yew tree, because the yew tree is a symbol of everlasting life to Christians, but it is the symbol of the guardian of the underworld to the pagans. And he's like, Helena, that tree belongs to me, and I want you to redeem it. And I'm like, okay. So,
and how are you spelling yew tree?
Y-E-W.
Okay, thank you.
Y-E-W. It's Taxus baccata. Taxus baccata is the yew tree. And here in England, we have 5 ancient yew trees that range from 1,500 to 5,000 years old.
My goodness.
Yeah, so we have some very ancient yew trees here in England, and they're wonderful. And so the Lord just kind of took me into making this piece of work. So what I did was I created this set of 33 cards, which were like blessing cards. And so I worked with a sculptor, and we got yew wood. And the two of us together, we created this yew wood stand so that you could put the cards on the stand. So it's kind of like a thought for the day, where you have the thought, and it's on my website. It's helenacavan.com website. But anyway, so God really took me deep when I was writing this, because he took me into the numerology. So that each card had meaning according to the number of the saying for that number. So for example, 13 is not a holy number. And so it says May you lead others with conducting strokes that empower unity, not rule by dictation, magically wielding impositions by waving wands. I bless you to be free and offer freedom. And then the fact on the bottom says, a musical conductor may have a baton whose head is made of you. Harry Potter's magic wand is also made of you. And what the Lord taught me was that the U is a letter in the Runic Alphabet, and the Runic Alphabet is the alphabet that witches use to cast their kind of spells and runes and things. And it's an ancient alphabet that goes back to the Vikings. And so when I was writing this, it was a really spiritual experience because of the slime that was sitting on so much about the you. But at the end of the day, God made the you. Mm-hmm. So anyway, to cut a long story short, last year, I felt the Lord say to me, Helena, I want you to make another series like that, but for water. And so if you can imagine that the water speaks to you and tells you something that will encourage you, but that is taken from the qualities of water itself. And then you utter a blessing from that, then that becomes a very powerful inspiration for people to remember to drink water. Because the one thing God gave me from doing 5 years of working in the detox is that people are dehydrated because they don't drink enough water. And the enemy is on an all-out war to distract people from drinking water and get them to drink anything else but water.
Yes, I
and
know.
as a result, their health is really suffering. And the thing is it doesn't matter what supplements you take, what food you're eating. If you are dehydrated, your body can't metabolize all the good stuff that you're giving to it. So first and foremost, we have to start with water and salt when it comes time for healing.
Absolutely.
And
right.
so anyway, so I wrote this kind of series of blessings, a bit like these, for water, and they're called 30 Blessings from Water. And I worked with the designer, and we designed them, and we made them all, and they've been just sitting in my drive. And the Lord said to me yesterday, he's like, Helena, I want you to set up those blessings as an email and give them away to people so that they can remember to drink water and learn why. So today, before this call, John and I have been working to set up a 30 email sequence whereby I send out one of these blessings every day so that people can remember. And then we are blessed with the PDF lecture and audio of this book, Your Body's Many Cries for Water. So we put a page together today for your audience so that they could go sign in and download for free the lecture of the results from this book and the audio, so they can either listen or read, and then get in and start receiving the sequence of the 30 days of blessings of water.
Oh my gosh, that's so brilliant. Thank you so much. Wow.
You're welcome. Well, I just really felt the Lord say that this is important. And what I would say is that in order to be a business person, there are two things we need to be incredibly resilient. And number one, we need to breathe and remember to stop and to breathe deeply.
Yes.
Because breathing is the most detoxifying thing we can do. When we exhale, we are getting rid of toxins. And we are inhaling and resetting our nervous system. And if you breathe deeply for 3 minutes, you can jump your nervous system out of fight, flight, freeze into rest, relax, heal. So number 1, we've got to breathe. Number 2, we have to drink water and stay very hydrated, because the hydration of our brain is what determines our mood, our emotions, our mental acuity, our memory, everything that that business demands of us on a day-to-day basis. Because basically being a business owner means you're solving problems. You're solving problems for your staff, and you're solving problems for your clients. And the better and the quicker that we are at solving problems, the more successful our business. So it's like, how are we going to stay on the cutting edge of our brain? Well, our brain is 85% water and the rest of it's fat. So it's like, eat good fats and drink enough water for your body weight, making sure that you keep, your electrolytes and salts going so that you keep everything in balance. Yeah. So I just kind of wanted to say that, from the physical perspective, being a good business person is not what we witness in Suits, where they're just pumping the coffee all day long and grabbing a bagel on the corner or a hot dog on the corner in between. And that's kind of mostly what you see business in portrayed doing. Yes. And it's like, that's not sustainable. And I've had many clients who come from the City of London, which is like Wall Street, and they are, intense in the financial market. And they're living on 6-7 cups of coffee a day, and then they go out at night and they're, downing vodka shots with their clients. And it's like, come on, that's too much toxicity for your system. And you will get better performance and better brain power if you are well hydrated and drinking water than coffee. So I've had lots of clients who have really cut the coffee from their lives and increased their performance and lowered their feelings of stress because of coming off the coffee. Because the thing that's happening now is just whole risk of adrenal fatigue, where people are just taxing, you're jacking up your system all the time with stimulants. And then one day your adrenal is just like, I can't do this anymore. And just like, and you can't jack it up, and we just don't want to get to that point. We want to jack ourselves up in the way that God made us to, which is with water. So think grape, think raisin. What's the difference between the grape and the raisin? It's water. The grape is nicely plumped up and the raisin's been dehydrated. So it's like, let's keep our brains graped up.
Yep, I agree. Actually, I went through a total metabolic reset last summer. And one of the very critical pieces, other than the intermittent fasting, now normal, you want to have 12 hours. Like if you stop eating at 8 o'clock at night, you want to not eat until 8 in the morning, have 12 hours. But when you're doing this reset, you want to push that. So I was more like 15 to even 18 hours of, don't eat so that you've got that. But another critical piece was literally eating pink Himalayan salt. Like I put it in my hand and eat it, drink a whole glass of water. And by doing that multiple times a day for the whole time, I was able to increase my hydration level. I'm still low, but it was increased, so it's good. And who would have thought that you have to eat salt to hydrate?
Yeah. Well, I mean, he talks about it because his story, Batman Galich's story, is that he healed all the prisoners in a prison in the Middle East with only salt and water. So what he says is for every 2 liters of water that you drink, you should have a pinch of salt. And basically,
and real salt, not the white iodized
stuff. Not the white junk. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Wow. this has been absolutely jam-packed with amazing information. I just can't even do a recap because there was so much. We've got working on our body and our brain because of our business, and then so much in our business. So, wow. Helena, thank you so much. I am so glad that I have you on the show, and I thought of, wow, she would be a good person because really, you blew my socks off, girlfriend. I loved it. Thank you so much, and I know that our audience loved it. Again, now they're going to go to the 30 Blessings of Water to go to...
Well, let me tell you, the name of the website is www.waterforlife.me.
Okay, Water for Life.
WATERFORLIFE.me.
.me. Okay, that's where they can go.
.me.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you also have the U-Tree series on Helena.
That's on my website, helenacavan.com. HelenaCavan.com. Yeah.
All right. Perfect. Excellent. And so again, I just want to, in case you joined us late, go to wherever you're listening or watching this, go to the show notes. And I will make sure that all of this is in there. So there, you don't have to, exactly, worry about it. And I want everybody to go ahead and get those downloads. Make sure that you take advantage of this very generous offer because it's, it's so important. And maybe even, Helena, we could talk about if they gave their cell phone number, if you could set up an automatic text, because sometimes emails get lost, but you could set up a daily little text that says, remember to check your water email. There's an inspiration waiting for you in your email today, or, whatever, something, we can talk about that offline. But I've found that sometimes the texting really helps me remember to do whatever I'm supposed to do. I've been in different programs where you go watch a little short video a day, but it's the texting that keeps me focused on it. So maybe.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, I wonder if we can run that from the UK. Probably.
I use a couple different services. I don't want to mention them here online, but I'll tell you offline which services I use. Yeah.
Thank you. That sounds fun. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that because that was prophesied to me about 3 years ago. One of my senior executives who came on a detox, she said, Helena, I would so love to get a text from you every day that says, remember to drink your water, Anna. So that's really funny you say that because somebody. Yeah.
I'll show you how to do that. Okay. Cool. All right. So thank you again for listening and watching, and thank you for sharing with your friends, subscribing on wherever you're listening to it. Go ahead and subscribe. And I love you so much for your support, and I want to encourage you to stay spirit-centered until the next time. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Spirit-centered business, spiritual principles, and business principles combined. If you're ready to align your destiny and discover the destiny of your business, join us. We are entrepreneurs, leaders, and business professionals who take the power of the spirit realm in our business seriously. We go beyond just consuming information. We participate, activate, and engage the supernatural with unbelievable results. If you want to gather with like-minded business professionals to activate spiritual principles and mastermind creative solutions to business challenges, Spirit-Centered Business is your tribe. Go to spiritcenteredbusiness.com to become a member today. Thank you for listening to Spirit-Centered Business with Bralynn Newby. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. The next stage of doing business by being spirit-centered is coming together in collaboration, working with spiritual principles and knowing our destiny. Join our tribe at spiritcenteredbusiness.com, and we'll catch you on the next broadcast. Peace out. you for listening to Spirit Centered Business with Bralynn Newby. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. The next stage of doing business by being spirit-centered is coming together in collaboration, working with spiritual principles and knowing our destiny. Join our tribe at spiritcenteredbusiness.com, and we'll catch you on the next broadcast. Peace out.